Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thank you for spending your lunchtime with us. While we can't be together in person, we're so grateful to be able to convene virtually for part 3 of our Working for All webinar series. The first centered on kicking off our community's campaign in this pandemic, and the second around education. Mark your calendar for our next webinar on November 18th, where we'll talk about health. A special shout out today to our sponsors for making this and all of our webinars possible. A few reminders about how to best utilize Zoom today. Please be sure you're muted during the presentation to minimize background noise. If you have questions, put them in the chat. If we don't address them during the panel, we'll follow up afterwards in our post-event recap. To warm up, feel free to put your name and organization in the chat to say hello. Today, we'll be discussing our community's current needs related to securing family-sustaining wages and stable housing, both critical pieces in moving individuals and families on pathways toward well-being. We'll also highlight the Hire Initiative, which focuses on helping adults in our community find steady, family-sustaining employment. For generations, our community has grappled with racial disparities in unemployment and poverty. We must acknowledge the historic and systemic legacy of racism in our country, which leads to these disparities. While many believe we are beyond race and racism, and that things will be better if we don't talk about race, to truly achieve a Dane County where everyone can succeed in school, work, and life, we need to trust the voices of living with disparities and understand the data that show very clearly, even with increased education, income, and effective programs, race plays a profound role in determining life outcomes. At United Way, our board has made a commitment to anti-racism, to not personally attack or judge people as racist, but to recognize systems and practices created decades and generations before any of us were born that still influence and perpetuate disparities in our lives today. As your trusted, objective, nonpartisan partner who frames community issues, mobilizes resources, and holds ourselves accountable for results, we know that doing our work without understanding this context does not put your dollar and time investments to best use to address root causes, create measurable change, and move the proverbial ball forward. All of us in our community have the opportunity, particularly now, as we must innovate out of this pandemic, to evolve forward to ensure equitable outcomes in education, financial stability, and health, where we can't predict life outcomes based on race. We know you're here because you want to be a part of the solution and action to make Dane County the best place to live for every resident. And we are honored that you look to us to help you do that because of our ability to connect community dots to create change beyond what any one person or organization can do alone. Today's phenomenal panel will give you a glimpse into some of that work. First, some context. Single women with children, members of communities of color, and low-income groups often struggle to secure family-sustaining jobs in our community. In fact, we know that 4 times more African-American adults are unemployed than white residents in Dane County. Remember about our historic and systemic issues. And to top that off, the minimum wage hasn't been increased in over 10 years. So even those who are employed may be working jobs that don't pay enough for them to live and thrive on. In Dane County, 19% of households earn more than the federal poverty level, but less than the basic cost of living here. That means that while they may be able to afford the bare minimum for essentials like housing, food, transportation, childcare, and healthcare, they're not able to save for emergencies or future goals like retirement. And in the time of COVID-19, many of these households are in crisis mode, having already used most or all of their savings and maxing out credit. We surveyed United Way partner agencies who shared with us, for families in our community today, the top 3 challenges are loss of employment, trouble paying for housing, and access to childcare. Further, our 2-in-1 calls show that food, housing, and funds for utilities are the greatest needs for them right now. While these barriers have always existed, the pandemic is only amplifying these challenges, making income needs greater than ever before. Take Sarah, for example. She's a single mom of 3 young children. Earlier this year, the local cafe where she waitressed had to close their doors because of COVID. And now that schools have shifted to a virtual environment, she spends most of her time helping her kids stay on task and educated, leaving very little time to look for work. Months behind on her bills, she is at high risk of eviction. And Jake, a 30-something factory worker who was also laid off at the beginning of the pandemic. He can't find a job because he, like more than 12,000 other adults in Dane County, doesn't have a high school degree. At United Way, we're committed to making sure that Jake and Sarah have the support to work toward a better, more stable life. But we can't do that alone. Through many partnerships and programs like the ones you'll hear about today, we're finding solutions to help find Dane County families pathways out of poverty. And it is more difficult in this pandemic right now. Many jobs go unfulfilled in Dane County because employers can't find workers with the right qualifications, while those in greatest need of a job often don't have necessary skill sets to be hired. Again, think back to our systemic issues. In 2013, we decided to partner with others in the community to do something even more about that. We launched the Hire Initiative, which helps to educate, train, and place adults in full-time family-sustaining jobs or jobs that pay more than $15 an hour. Since then, we've helped almost 3,000 people in our community find steady employment. And in 2019 alone, 33% of Hire participants, or 311 people, landed jobs earning $15 an hour or more. Even with 2020 being a difficult year for employment, we found that former Hire participants are better positioned to keep or obtain jobs during the pandemic. Humberto, for example, took the bilingual construction series class at Latino Academy last fall as part of his Hire curriculum. Then in April, he lost hours at his former employer and was forced to look for a new job. Thanks to the training he received and the confidence he gained, he was able to get a full-time job starting at $17 an hour with full benefits at a company in Waunakee. While success stories like these are fantastic, we recognize that employment isn't the only income-related issue facing our community. So as part of Hire, we aim to break down barriers by also offering a child care subsidy, housing funds, and microloans so that people may be positioned for success. These are all made possible by generous donors in our community, generous donors like you. Thanks to our child care subsidy, Kiki was able to find daycare close to her home for her 1-year-old so that she could attend her Hire training. She was able to spend less time traveling, less money on gas for her care, and had less stress while she worked for a brighter future. We also know that culture and policy at workplaces are critically important to making sure that every employee hired is successful. That's why we work with employers to do training about HR practices and implicit bias to make sure that these circumstances are win-win-win for the employee, the employer, and partners. Obviously, none of this work happens alone. It is thanks to local partner agencies and nearly 50 local employers that we're able to put your dollars to great use to make this difference. Our job is nowhere near done yet. We need your help to secure the economic future and to really disrupt those systemic injustices for so many in Dane County. Today is all about how these networks and collaborations are making significant change possible. With your donations, your commitment to this issue, and your willingness to adapt your workplaces, you're helping more families obtain a better and brighter future. With that in mind, I'd like to welcome our panelists to share their thoughts and observations on our community's current needs related to employment and housing and what we can collectively do to help. Joining us today, Dave Beck-Engel. He is Vice Chairman of J.H. Bindorf & Son, Inc. and past Chair of the Hire Employer Council. Dave is also one of my bosses on the United Way board. Another one of my bosses, Sabrina Madison, founder of the Progress Center for Black Women, and she's chair of our Income Community Solutions team. Vanessa McDowell, CEO of YWCA Madison, a great partner with United Way, as well as Baltazar Dianda Santana, co-founder and executive director of the Latino Academy of Workforce Development. And last but not least, Melissa Menning, who is the program director for the Road Home Dane County. I also had the chance to peruse the invitation list, and there are many other partners on this call as well. So know that you are all here on this panel in spirit as well. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. The racial disparities that exist in relation to unemployment, we know they have a ripple effect in our community. Without sustainable employment, people are unable to provide food, housing, and proper care for their families and themselves. And as a result, we see more people of color falling below the poverty line. With that in mind, Dave, I'd love to hear from you first. Why is a diverse and healthy workforce important to you at Bindorf? And why do you partner with United Way as one of the employers involved in the Hire Initiative?
Thanks, Renee, and hello everybody out there in the virtual world. It's great to be here today. So, Renee, you asked great questions, and it's a question I could really spend a long time talking. I could probably take the whole session time talking about, but I won't. I promise. I'll stick to my time frame. Your first question regarding why is it important to have a diverse workforce? You know, I think it's important for every company, and include ours in this, Bindorf, to be be part of the fabric of the community in which you work and live. And you really can't do that unless you have representatives from all corners of your community. And that's something we focus on. And what we've learned in the last several years of really focusing on increasing our diversity, it has increased the talent level we've been able to attract, increased the, the type of thought process we go through, get away from groupthink, listening to other ideas and opinions that come from different backgrounds. It's been really a blessing. We really found also as a business that a lot of our community partners are investing in this, and they expect this of us as a business to be invested with them in a diverse workforce. So that is, we found so many advantages and excitement about doing this that, it's just, it really goes, it's almost intuitive that once you get into it. Second part of your question is equally important. The Hire Initiative is a great idea that continues on. I was really fortunate to be part of it, working with my co-chair, Marcia Anderson, the United Way staff, our partner agencies, learned so much about the challenges that people who have historically been underemployed or unemployed, the challenges they have faced to get out of poverty, to get into steady jobs, to overcome the barriers, as Renee mentioned earlier, that they face to get into employment. I've learned so much also about the trauma that's associated with being in poverty, especially for children. And, looking at the future of our community and our country, we have to take care of our children. So, by providing stable jobs, by providing jobs that pay enough for people to get a stable household, to not have food insecurity, have children have a place to go home to, know that they have food that's going to nourish them. This is what's going to help us succeed in all this. The Hire Initiative has helped us do this. Renee cited some of the statistics and the success we've had. We've exceeded the goals that have been set, and we're proud of that, but we're only scratching the surface. There's a lot of work to do yet, and what it's going to take is the entire community. We saw a list of employers that are participating in this. I couldn't count fast enough as it went by on the screen, but I know there's in the range of 60 or so employers right now participating in the Hire Initiative. We need everybody. We need everybody looking at this. You don't have to be commit to hiring an exorbitant number of people. If you're able to hire one or two people through this program to help people work their way out of poverty, that's a success. And that's what we need. And that's what United Way needs. And that's why I'm proud to have been part of this and proud to have Findorff continue to be part of this.
That's marvelous, Dave. Thank you so much for your leadership and for really challenging us all to think about our own workplaces. So thank you. Sabrina, as chair of the Income Community Solution Team and as an entrepreneur, what are the challenges to wealth building and financial stability in Dane County? And how is United Way working to create change within the workplace environment?
So speaking from my role at United Way as an entrepreneur and the founder of the Progress Center, and being able to use some of our dollars we were granted from United Way, some of the major challenges is just not having savings to be able to deal with a global health pandemic. Very early on, we had folks really in distress because they had to cut in hours or cut in pay or just no hours at all. And there was the stress and also the mental health stress that came along with not being able to know what's going to happen in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, 2 months from now. And what we're seeing is that folks we helped early on by paying rent or utilities or transportation costs, they have exhausted their unemployment. There has not been another check from the federal government, and they have no clue what's going to happen next. So now we're seeing entrepreneurs who we may have helped pay their office rent or their space rent come back because they're looking for support because they were able to make enough sales, enough in their businesses to keep themselves afloat, and they just don't have the income. So the good thing about it is the income team, we're very much aware of what folks are experiencing on the day-to-day, especially to a childcare subsidy. You just don't know how happy I am, I was to hear about that good news. And I think all of those little things come into play to just definitely folks need financial help. But if you can remove the stress of not knowing and that this help is there, that just improves folks' well-being overall. So I'm super thankful to be on the team. But just as an entrepreneur, period, not knowing whether or not you're going to have financial support if you're in a business where you're very much dependent on, customer traffic and folks being able to come in and out is very stressful. So I'm thankful. We're thankful for everyone in this community who continues to support the work. But just be conscious that anyone who received help early on, they're in a place where they're trying to figure out what's going to happen, especially when the lift is held, or evictions are processed again. That's another stressful point. So we have to figure out what we're going to do when we hit December 31st. What's going to happen right at the beginning of the year. So, so yeah, that's my piece.
Thanks, Sabrina. So you're mentioning really the eviction moratorium, which, is the policy that says folks can't be evicted right now. And we know we've also heard from many folks that a lot of individuals aren't getting renewed. Their leases aren't getting renewed. So, we're finding more families and cars and things. Thanks for those really important points. And it's a really difficult time, especially as people can't keep their businesses open. We talked a little earlier about how single women with children can often struggle to obtain family-sustaining jobs in Dane County. Vanessa, what are the disparities that you see for families and single women of color with children? And how specifically does YWeb Academy and partnership with Hire have an impact?
Sure. Well, first, I want to say thank you for having me on this panel. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things that Sabrina mentioned are similar to the same struggles that we see. I think I'll answer the second question first.
Okay.
As far as Hire, we have been a part of the Hire initiative, I believe, since its inception, and we're very proud partners to be able to support in being the holders of the sort of housing assistance lane of things. So when you mentioned we do help with the assistance for folks who may need help with housing search or possibly rental assistance or anything having to do with their electric bills, things like that, to try to get them over the hump while they're in our class. So for instance, our contribution to Hire is our YWeb Career Academy, which is a 15-week course that is intense. You really can't hold another job while you're taking the course. And if you are, it's like third shift, so you can imagine all the things you'd have to juggle to be a part of the course. But we are making some tweaks to it to make it more accessible. But one of the things that we see is through our Hire initiative, we've had people, well, through YWeb specifically, we've had people come to us homeless, working 2 or 3 jobs just to make it. And by the time, as you know, IT isn't a lucrative field. So entry level, getting in the door is major. And so after completing our course, we've had folks that enter the IT field making $50,000, $60,000 a year entry level. And so you can imagine the shift and the change that comes from that for a family. And so we're very proud of the success we've had with our YWeb Career Academy. To the answer about sort of the disparities that are happening with single women and children, I have to say, and specifically women of color, and then of course I want to center around Blackness as a Black woman. It's challenging, right? Because I feel like this question, we shouldn't have to keep asking it, right? That there should be some education around the disparities. The fact that if you don't know the disparities, that says something too, right? And it was funny because I just was watching This Is Us. Great show. If you have not seen this show, the premiere was this week. And there was it was a lot of powerful moments, but there was one powerful moment that I thought speaks to this a little bit. And it was between Randall and his sister. And she basically, as a white woman, is trying to comfort Randall because George Floyd's murder had just happened in this scene. And she asked, well, what can I do and how can I support and all these things? And Randall simply says, like, you all are sort of arriving to the party late. This is not new to the African American community. We're tired. We're exhausted. And so I kind of saw that in this question was a little bit like, please, community, non-Black community, educate yourselves, on the disparities because we're tired. We've been dealing with these disparities forever. And it really is sort of distressing and causes us, I think, frustration and heartache to have to constantly prove our disparities or prove that, there is this huge have and have nots in our community and in our country that oftentimes and for many years has been ignored. And so really wanting to speak to that in this conversation to say, there's some work that we need to do in Madison. The Higher Initiative is great. And I think, as Dave said, we're just scratching the surface. But I think there also needs to be some real reckoning with what's really going on in our community and a real reckoning with doing something that's major, right, to shift that. I think sometimes we're just kind of scratching the surface and doing these certain things, but we're almost maybe scared to take a risk to do something radical or out the box to really shift things. So when you talk about generational wealth, it doesn't happen in the Black community. We don't have generational wealth. So we're already starting at negative. So I'll stop there. As Dave said, I could go on and on and on, but I just wanted to bring that sort of lens into this space.
No, I appreciate that. And congratulations on your successful conference. I know the YW has done an amazing job trying to help the community understand. And I think even beyond knowing disparity exists, the reasons disparities have, continued to perpetuate, I think is an important thing. One aha I had after George Floyd's murder was a volunteer who had been very deeply involved with homelessness reduction work for 10, 15 years at United Way. And her comment to me was, I had no idea about the impact of race and racism on disparity. And I was like, oh my gosh, we didn't do our jobs by making sure people understood, even while doing the work, the reasons why things are the way they are, and more importantly, what we can do together to come out and build solutions. So thank you for that comment. I'm going to move to Baltazar now. Baltazar, what are the specific needs of the Latinx community in employment? And what other supports are needed right now in the areas of income, employment, and housing?
Thank you very much, Renee. Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everybody. Really want to thank United Way for all the support and everybody who has been part of the Higher Initiative. A shout out to all the Higher partners, for staying strong. I'm gonna read part of what I'm gonna say, and then later I will just, try to not read that. But anyway, so 85% of our students totally or partially lost employment since the beginning of the pandemic. COVID unfortunately has destroyed many areas. But one of the things that we keep talking about this at the Latino Academy and with other partners, COVID has not destroyed the hard work, the resilience and creativity of our community. Our community has really taught us a lot during these difficult times. At the Latino Academy, we have continued providing trainings to our students through the Bilingual Construction Program and Transportation Academy and other trainings. Our students have demonstrated that regardless to what happened, they are willing and they are ready to continue learning. I know many other higher partners who serve the Latinx community, such as Centro Hispano, continue providing trainings. To answer your question, Renee, the following, what are some of the needs? Just like Vanessa, we can talk the whole day, about this, but, there are the need to expand training opportunities to new industries. This is a time for us to be creative. Yes, we have these systems already in place. This is a time for us to think out of the box because, our community is thinking out of the box. They are trying to be as creative as possible to continue, bettering themselves. Also, the need for retraining the workforce that is currently laid off. Many of our students that are taking all these classes, taking advantage while they don't have a job. Also to provide our participants, support, digital skills support. One of the things that we have found is there is a need for workers' rights for essential workers. I am very privileged to be having the opportunity to work from home. Many of our essential workers do not have that opportunity. I think our community right now, we need, we demand to be treated with dignity. So those are, some of those needs that we need right now. Other needs, housing and rental assistance, childcare support, and mental health support. And I could not forgive myself if I don't bring up something that is very, very dear to my heart, which is our undocumented community. Through this pandemic, many of our undocumented folks in Madison, in Dane County, the state, have lost employment without them being able to receive that support. They were not the lucky ones who were able to get that financial check from the government. And these are folks who have incredibly supported the economic development of our city, our county, the state, but yet in moments like this, we continue forgetting about them. Thank you very much for the Hire Initiative and United Way for always being open and welcoming everybody. Again, our undocumented community is suffering, and we stand with our undocumented brothers and sisters who are dealing with the worst of the worst during these uncertain times of unemployment.
Thank you, Baltazar. I think that something a lot of the community doesn't recognize is that all families' kids are in our schools. You look at our economy, and obviously, not being eligible for any other kind of assistance, that really is very disruptive to families, and that's an understatement. So thank you for talking about your programs, and certainly for all of your comments around our community. Melissa, how are housing and employment interconnected? And to that point, what are our community's specific housing needs, and how are your programs addressing those issues for families?
Yeah, good questions. Again, like everybody else said, I think I could go on and on with those questions. I feel like a lot of what I have to say is going to be somewhat repetitive of what the other panelists have already highlighted, but housing and employment are really interconnected, mostly due to, especially in Madison, the housing affordability crisis we have in this community, where 2-bedroom apartments are close to $1,200 at this point. People who are working minimum wage jobs would need to have 2.5 times full-time jobs in order to even pay rent. That's an issue. Many of the families we work with are paying over 80% of their income for rent. And so when things are that tight, any little thing that happens is a huge deal to families and can lead them to homelessness. And so I think about this a lot in terms of like unstable housing is going to lead to an unstable workforce and vice versa. If you're homeless with your children, your ability to focus at work, many of our families don't have jobs that have paid leave if a kid's homesick. And right now, especially with kids being homeschooled and childcare issues and safety, all of those issues really lead families to have to make hard decisions about employment and whether to provide for families or take care of their families. And so I feel like even more so now with COVID, I think that that employability and housing crisis, I would say, is starkly, it's in full focus right now. We need to be looking at not only how to get people employed, but how to be talking to employers to be sensitive to the needs of families, to make it a place where everyone is able to succeed at their jobs. So second part of your question, the biggest needs we're seeing right now, so there's 135 families experiencing homelessness, and that's on our priority list. So that doesn't include all the doubled up families, et cetera, which is a huge number. We know the health risks for people who are experiencing homelessness is much worse, especially with coronavirus. They're twice as likely to be hospitalized, needing critical care, more likely to die of COVID. So this is a huge issue within our community. We're seeing the biggest needs we're probably seeing at this time are the emergency rental assistance, short and long term. Sabrina talked a little bit about the eviction moratorium that ends in December. Families still need to show that they can't pay, and the reasons why they can't pay. Landlords can still evict for behaviors, et cetera. So this isn't, and it's not like rent goes away. Rent's still due January. But fees can still be accrued as people are not paying rent. And so we're on this brink. Landlords can still non-renew. And so this is a huge issue, not only now, but looming in the next few months here. Second thing we're seeing a lot of is eviction prevention assistance. So that short-term money, as well as legal representation. Landlords are not always doing things by the books. And so many of our families don't have that legal representation to fight back against those injustices. Long-term housing support in terms of vouchers, that ability that if rent fluctuates or if income fluctuates due to childcare or whatever the reasons, health issues, a lot of our families have severe health issues that COVID makes it dangerous for them to be working right now. Those types of things. We need rental vouchers that will adjust with people's incomes. And then that child care education support is huge amongst our families right now. At the Road Home, we're trying to do some of these partnerships. We recently just started partnerships with both CDA and DCHA to try to get vouchers out to families who are experiencing homelessness within our community, which has been a good partnership. We've partnered with United Way on some rapid rehousing stuff to try to do that quick move-in assistance. But we know that subsidies and things like that are going to need to be a little bit deeper than normal and might need to last longer than they normally would. And so that creates this dynamic of the need far outweighing the amount of services we have. But we really have been trying to look at all different sectors, city, county, United Way, HUD, et cetera, working with other organizations like the Y, Salvation Army, to really be creative. And we know it's going to take a lot of different solutions to help families stabilize, especially with COVID. On top of that, partnering with, this is stressful for people. And so partnering with organizations like NESIS around mental health support for all the stress and trauma families are going through, peer engagement so that people have someone who's been through this before. If they're not comfortable talking to support services, it's going to be multifaceted, and it really is going to take everybody in the community to make sure that people have a safe place to be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Melissa. And that's so profound. I think that everybody watching can really hear that intensity in your voice, because this is a really critical time. Many of you know, because you're such great United Way partners, that collaboratively we were able to reduce that acute homelessness number by half over the last 5 years. And COVID has wiped out so much of that progress because of this instability. And so, it's really so important that we can all pull together and do those things Melissa was talking about to help invest in our families. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I need about a minute to close. So keep that in mind as you're answering this final question for our panelists. I'll go in the same order that we started with. For all of you, what is keeping you up at night, and how can our community respond? And for folks who are watching, if you got a question in the chat, please do enter it in now. And if we aren't able to get to it, we'll respond in our follow-up to you. But let's hit that last question with our panelists. What's keeping you up at night, and how can our community respond? Dave, let's start with you.
Well, this time of year, with everything that's going on in our world, that we read about it every day, it's a fairly long list, but I'll stick to the topic at hand. And one of the big things I do worry about is the impact of our pandemic, the increased infections, what's that doing to our economy and our ability to keep momentum going that we've started to build with the Hire Initiative. We've had, as I mentioned, some success in hiring and getting people jobs that pay at least $15 an hour, but we've only scratched the surface. And my worry is the weight or the barrier that what we're facing now in the economy is going to hurt that momentum. So I hope I'm wrong, but we definitely have a speed bump to go over. I just don't know how big.
Thank you, Dave. Sabrina.
For me, it's really, really personal. And I'm sure I'm feeling a lot what other folks are feeling around the pandemic and bills and, just dealing with folks who are dealing with so much is really emotional. But dealing with having two brothers in the Wisconsin Department of Corrections right now, and both of those prisons have COVID outbreaks, and then dealing with folks who are reaching out to us for financial support or moral support or just mental health resources, and then hearing about their family members are in places where there are COVID outbreaks and they don't really have any control. So I think just really what's keeping me up at night is knowing that we are nowhere near close to being out of this pandemic, and knowing that so many folks not only have these financial burdens, but they have loved ones that they're losing or that are in places like nursing homes and prisons where you can't really control them being able to leave and be in safer environments. So please wear a mask, folks. Please wear a mask. Quit putting yourselves in situations where you can't socially distance. And just, I think Dr. Fauci said it best, kind of just buckle down. Like, we got to figure out how to just ride it out, chill out at home, get your little warm sweaters, and just ride this thing out. Just stay home.
Thanks, Sabrina. Vanessa?
Yeah, it's funny you asked this question because I actually haven't been sleeping well. So that probably is because of these things.
Yes, yes.
I agree with everything that everyone said, but I think for me, one thing is, this racial injustice that's going on in our country. To wake up and always feel like I'm going to see another Black person that is killed at the hands of police keeps me up at night. Just reading about the Philadelphia situation that just happened recently with Walter Wallace Jr. So those things keep me up at night. Having to wake up to my neighbor's Trump flag keeps me up at night. November 3rd keeps me up at night.
Baltazar?
Thank you, Renete. Thanks, Vanessa. I'm gonna agree with Vanessa. I think November 3rd, it's gonna depend on what's gonna happen, how our community, if our community is gonna be continue being valued or unfortunately continue being destroyed. One of the things that, as I mentioned before, our students, our community members, and everybody has taught us that we have the thrive, we have the resilience. So one of the things that keep me up at night, and my staff can attest to this, is what else can we do? We have not done enough. Every time we go home, it's like, is there anything that we need to do? Any training, even if for you who do not have documents, for you who have documents, some tools, some skills that you might need for you to be able to get a great wage. Yesterday, one of our students got a job for $11 an hour. We cannot celebrate that. We cannot celebrate people still making $11 an hour. So, that's what keeps us alive. What else can we do for our community? And, I'm very hopeful that September 30th is gonna come in our community, and all of our minorities, hopefully will be respected after that day. Thank you.
Melissa?
Yeah, I think all the things stated, but for me, particularly around housing issues and in my job, the eviction moratorium looming is what keeps me up at night right now. Lots of people getting evicted, people beyond who we're typically seeing, the numbers being huge, and not being able to have the resources within our community to address that appropriately. Thinking about all of those kids without a place to live, that definitely keeps me up at night. What community could do to help, I think really, if you know landlords, to encourage them to work with housing programs, especially with all these vouchers out right now. Money for services and for eviction prevention, legal representation, advocating for additional funds for these things, advocating for an extension to the moratorium, increase in CARES funding, those types of things, I think could really help. It's really scary to think about the amount of people that this eviction could be facing eviction here in the near future.
Thank you. Wow, there's a lot that we are constantly juggling, and obviously in a health crisis, in a racial crisis, in an economic crisis, these are all things that really center all the spaces where United Way tends to, help problem solve with all of you. And I'm so grateful to our panelists today for bringing your hearts and bringing your smarts and bringing your passion and really evidence-based successes and results to help us understand better the issues that our families are going through and to really lift up what we can be doing as individuals and organizations to create more positive change, certainly in these challenging times. I know when the stay-at-home orders hit in March, one of the first things we talked about inside at United Way was how do we prevent a wave of hunger? How do we prevent a wave of homelessness? Because that's what happens once income is disrupted, not to mention all the stress, isolation, and fear around health issues. And while we know that the number of people in poverty across Dane County, there are more white individuals in poverty, and at that working poor level, there are families of color, we know the disproportionate impact of who gets sick, who recovers, who dies, are all disproportionately impacted. And that's why it's so important to lift up these conversations and lift up what the community can do to really pull together and make sure that we center family health, our community well-being, and work on that together. And that's what we're here to do. And that's what we do with all of you in this great partnership. So again, thank you to our panelists for your amazing partnerships and for your candor today. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. I know you're here because you care so deeply, and you know that we don't always come to shared agreement, but we can come to shared understanding and figure out where we agree, what we can get done, and really, again, frame those issues, mobilize resources, and be accountable for results and positive change. So please share what you learned with your friends and colleagues and family members today. And know that your contributions to the community's campaign support the long-term change that's needed to ensure economic stability for Dane County families. There's a lot of work that needs to happen right now in emergency response and making sure that families or small businesses and others are stable. And there's a lot of transformation that must happen. And United Way is very proud to sit at the intersection of those tensions between Black and brown and white, between wealth and poverty, between even liberal, conservative, and those systems like healthcare, law enforcement, education, nonprofit, and business. That is something that we know together we can figure out how do we come to this together? How do we continue to build that economy that works for more people? Because that will lift up health, safety, well-being for each and every Dane County resident. If you're one of our corporate partners, please be an advocate and consider what Dave asked, which is joining the Hire Initiative. We have a link that is showing up in your chat box right now, 10 ways Dane County employers can help alleviate poverty. This was curated by our Hire partners and is a really great tool. In addition to giving and advocating, you can also help through volunteering. Find opportunities on volunteertime.org that help provide essential services and supplies to our neighbors right now. There are a lot of company teams who are really trying to figure out ways to come together virtually, come together safely, to do volunteering such as creating packs of diapers and wipes for families served by RISE. That's a project that's coming up right away. And there are many, many, many other projects going on at volunteertime.org, which we would love to help you get connected with for our great agency partners who have volunteer opportunities. So once again, I want to say thank you to our sponsors who make these projects and this year's Working for All webinar series possible. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope you keep what was discussed today in mind as we make our community a place where everyone can succeed in school, work, and life. Thank you all so much.